welcome from me, Rose, for today's Friday Live. It's a very warm day here in London. Do let us know where you're tuning in from today and say hello in the comments. We've got Jessie with us in the comments today. She's en route to a wedding of a very, very special person, our very own Ellie, who's getting married at the weekend. So we all wish her the best from the Findmypast family. We've got Roz joining us. Hi, Roz from a sunny Chelmsford, Massachusetts. Hello, welcome. I feel like every time I do a Facebook Live, I'm blessed with warm weather. It's about 27 degrees here in London at the moment. Oh, I'm sorry, Alan. Oh, soggy Roscoe, Illinois. I'm sorry. I'm going to send you some lovely warm weather across the Atlantic. Got more people joining us. Hello, Daphne. Hi, Kim. Hello, Anya. It's warm in North Fife. That's good to hear. The warmth has got up to Scotland. Hi, Sally. Hot and sunny in Whitney, no, Oxford. You've had it say, Sally, you've been sitting in the sun chatting today. I envy you. We've got Sandy joining us over on YouTube from Newmarket, Ontario. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. Oh, not the weather over in Northern Ireland. I'm sorry, Linda. Or send some of that warm weather your way. So today we've got a military theme for you today. And our question of the week, not military themed, and we will come back to it later. Our question of the week today is, if you could swap lives for a day with one of your ancestors, who would it be and why? If you could swap lives with one of your ancestors for a day, who would it be and why? So have a think about that, and we'll come back to that soon. Okay, let's get started. More people joining us. Hello, Jenny from sunny Devon, Gillian from Edinburgh, Heather, also in Edinburgh. Hi, Andrew, from Lancashire, and hi, Peter. Thanks for joining us today. Great. So we've got a bit of a feast for you on the military side of things this week. We've got 4 brand new record sets, all military, which we're going to take a deep dive into. And we've got 5 fascinating new newspaper titles for you. So here's a list of our new military sets of the week. We've got new records joining the Campaign, Gallantry and Long Service Medal Awards. We've got new records also joining the British Royal Navy and Royal Marine Service and Pension records. And we've got 2 brand new sets. So we've got recommendations for military honours from 1935 to 1990. And we've got British Army lists and commission registers from 1661 to 1826. Now, first up, I'd like to introduce the Long Service and Good Conduct Medal. So this is joining our Campaign and Gallantry and Long Service Medal Awards collection. Now, this particular medal was awarded to men serving in the British Army after 18 years of good service. So 18 years, it's a long time. And you can see the medal here, a nice likeness of King George V. And I found that in our one of our newspapers, the Illustrated London News. So what can these records tell you? Well, you have the name, you have the corps, the year of the award, the regiment number, the rank, the return date, and any other notes. So this, here's an example. The set is index only, but it does provide some really fascinating information. And I pulled out this particular record. This is from April 1914, so a really pivotal time, just before the start of the First World War. Now, this particular Long Service Good Conduct Medal was awarded to T. Maguire, and he was a company sergeant major with the Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers. Now, that's an Irish line infantry regiment, which was part of the British Library. British Army, I do apologise. British Library on the brain. Until 1968. So we have his service number, which is 4974. And a really top tip for you is that when you are searching our military, armed forces and conflict section, you can actually search by service number. And this is a really useful tool. So I popped in that number, 4974, and I found T. Maguire, first name of Thomas. I found that he fought beyond his award for long service and good conduct into the First World War. So let's bear in mind that he's already served 18 years, but he goes on to serve for 1920. So let's say he was 18 when he began his service, he would have been perhaps 36 in 1914, and he fought for another 6 years, so pushing him into his 40s. We can also see how he rose through the ranks to becoming a second lieutenant, an acting captain, and finally a captain with the Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers. So he'd become an officer during this time, reflecting that great loss of officers that happened throughout the First World War. So let's move on to our next record set. Now, this is forming part of our British Royal Navy and Royal Marines service and pension records. And it is the Royal Marine shorelist from 1810. Now, this set is formed of nearly 20,000 records. And I just love 1810. The earlier, the better. And I myself had an ancestor who was serving in the Royal Navy around this time. So a wonderful window into the past with this particular set. So what this set is a list of men who joined the Royal Marines in 1810. So wonderfully historic. And it can tell you the name, the rank, and the division of your ancestor, the date that they joined the Royal Marines, where they joined from, the date they left, as well as to where they went. And you might find some other remarks too. And this is taken from a National Archives set, ADM 96. So I see a mention, I think Kim has said, most of my military ancestors won't be in the good conduct records. I think, yes. And this is James Dixie, and he's not in here. He's not noted in this set for his good conduct. So he was a private, and this record says that he was recruited, I think in June 1810. So with recruited, I'm wondering if that means that he was press ganged into the Royal Marines, and it would have been a really tough life at that point in history. He was based in Chatham, but it seems that James Dixie and the Royal Marines, they just did not get on. We see in the section to where he went, it says ran from barracks. So he's deserted after 2 months. He's ran from barracks in August of 1810. So I just find that a really wonderful window onto the past there with James Dixie. And from the dishonourable Dixie to the slightly more honourable men and women of the British Army, Royal Navy and the RAF. So this is our next set of the week. It was recommendations for military honours and rewards, 1935 to 1990. So it's quite a modern set, this one. So we've gone from 1810, really nearly all the way up to the 21st century with our collections this week. And this is nearly 80,000 new records from another National Archives collection, that's WO373. Now, this particular record set, it gives us the names of those recommended for military honours in the British Army and in the Dominions armies, and there are some records of those who served with the Royal Navy, Royal Marines and Royal Air Force. These awards were given for meritorious service and gallantry in the face of the enemy, and they were awarded to both men and women. So before women joined the regular army, you'll find awards for those in the nursing corps, for example. And these records, they will show you the first and the last name, service number, rank, regiment, announcement of the award date, context, and a description. So these transcripts, oh my word, they are bursting with information, and I couldn't actually quite fit all the transcript on one slide there for you, so I had to slice it up because there is so much to find out. And this example that I pulled out, it's a recommendation for an award for Leonora Wilkins in 1943. So what was Leonora up to in 1943? Well, she's a matron with Queen Alexandra's Imperial Military Nursing Service. And her award's been announced in February 1943, and she's been serving in Egypt and Libya during the Second World War. And she's been awarded the Royal Red Cross, which is an award for exceptional services in military nursing. So a really inspiring set there. And finally, our last, but by no means least new set of the week is the British Army lists and commission registers. Now, this is a very old set, so old in fact, we're going all the way back to the 1600s. It dates back exactly to 1661, when King Charles II issued a royal warrant that would set up the first regiments that would form the British Army. And it lists the names of those officers serving in the British Army. So this set starts in 1661 and it goes all the way up to 1826. And what information can you get from this set? Well, you've got first and last names, regiment, rank, event date, and year. Now, of course, when I was browsing this set, I had to go back to 1661. It's not often we get that chance to go back that far. And when I did that, I found a record for Thomas Ashton. And he's a captain in the King's Regiment of Guards at Dunkirk. And this is from June 1661. This set does come alongside with images, not from the time, admittedly. They have been compiled from other lists. This particular list has come from a history of the Grenadier Guards. But what it does give you is detailed annotations about the men in the lists. So for Thomas Ashton, for example, it details the variations of the spelling in his name. It's a really useful tool if you have managed to get back to him to know how the spelling of his name varied. Now, he has also been erroneously designated as Sir Thomas Ashton too, so he was sometimes given incorrectly a knighthood, and we learned that he was out of the regiment but before 1670. So really fascinating set. And Jessie's asking, has anybody managed to trace any of your ancestors back to 1661? I think I have. I need to confirm. But really, yeah, that's a very good question. I might steal that for a question of the week, Jessie. All right. So as promised, question of the week. And the question is, and I can see there's been some answers coming in already. If you could swap lives for a day with one of your ancestors, who would it be and why? So I'm just going to dive into some comments here. Anya, nope. It's a note from her. I don't think I'd like to swap with any of my ancestors. No antibiotics, no contraception, few vaccines, working in the coal mines or working as a coal trimmer, being at home, bringing up 5 to 10 children doesn't appeal to me, I'm afraid. And I agree. Life was tough. Life was very, very tough. Thank you for that, Anya. We've got Fanny over on YouTube. Thank you for joining us today. I was swapped with Elizabeth Dragot. I'm going to try and pronounce that. A French Huguenot from La Rochelle area. Fleeing Catholic persecution, she and family settled on Staten Island, New York in 1700, where I grew up. What was her life like? I feel like her life needs a film and a book. What a fascinating life, and that she settled on Staten Island, where you grew up. Oh, that's fantastic. What an amazing story. Diving through, I've got some more coming in. We've got Kim. What's Kim? With my great-grandfather Albert Walter Butcher, who in 1898 changed his identity to that of a dead man and moved from Norwich to London. I would love to be inside his head to know why he did that. Oh, bonus. Love this. Lot to unpick. The ancestor you wouldn't want to swap lives with. My 4th great-grandmother on the day of her hanging. Okay, so we've got a change in identity and we've got a hanging. Kim, please tell us more about both. And again, we've got a screenplay here. We've got books, maybe several. Oh, absolutely fascinating stuff there. What else we got? Question of the week, Andrew. One of my great uncles went to sea. He got his master's ticket 10 days before the 1851 census when he was with the B&NA company, which later became Cunard, competing with SS Great Britain. Oh, wow. It was amazing time in history. Oh, fantastic. I think it is that kind of snapshot, isn't it? You know, to go back to either find out our ancestors' intentions or to be able to see the sites that they were seeing. I haven't made my mind up as to which ancestor I'd be swapping with. Just looking for some more answers. Scrolling through. Oh, we've got Gillian. My great-grandmother Agnes Matheson, from the few photographs I have of her, she looks quite a character. Gillian, I know that I know that sense. Very recently I was privileged enough to see a photograph of, let me work it out, my great grandmother from the 1880s, and she too looked quite a character. Yes, what was going on in their lives? What, where have they derived that wonderful sense of character from? I completely, yes, that's a very good one. We all have these interesting characters in our family, and if you're lucky enough to get a photograph, it's just sort of even more tantalizing. Wonderful stuff. I've got Sue Moon. She'd like to swap lives for a day with her Irish grandmother, so I can find out if the rumours of her life are true or not. Yeah, that if we could find out more when we're swapping for a day, that would be great. I recently been finding out about my great-grandfather who emigrated to Canada, and he got up to all sorts of no good. It does seem like he did earn this reputation of being a ne'er-do-well. I've come across some newspaper reports. So yeah, definitely getting behind those rumours. Wonderful stuff. Wonderful comments today. Just looking to see if there's any more coming through. Sally, I would like to swap places with my great-grand-uncle who travelled to Australia in 1906 from the UK. He travelled by boat and it took about 3 months. He stopped off in many places and sent a postcard home at each stop. Oh, wow. What a wonderful story. And Sally, do we have those postcards? Wonderful documents. And I just don't think about it today. We think it's a long flight. It is a long flight to Australia, 24 hours, but the amount of time it took back then to travel. I'm always so inspired by those who made the decision to emigrate. It must have been absolutely terrifying. And my own branch really just stayed. My family mainly just stayed in England. They moved from the countryside to London, and that was about it, apart from my ne'er-do-well great-grandfather. But probably the less said about him, the better. Wonderful. Okay. Yes, there's lots of food for thought. Okay, thanks so much everyone for all of your answers, and please do share all of your wonderful stories with us. It's really so interesting to hear everybody's different takes on this particular question. You know me. Sally, before we move on, postcards do exist. They were left to me in a huge album. Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's so special. That's so special. Wonderful stuff. So yes, you know me long enough, I think, by now to know that we're always going to mention the newspapers when I talk to you. And we've had some really great new newspapers join us this week. We've got 3 Victorian and early 20th century titles from Bromley. And the earliest is the Bromley and West Kent Telegraph, and this was founded in 1865. Hot on the heels of that was the Bromley Journal and the West Kent Herald, which was founded in 1869. And then finally, the Bromley Chronicle, which is founded in 1891. So these are some really great local newspapers from South London. So if you've got ancestors in the area, definitely recommend browsing through these. We've also had a special illustrated title join us this week, also founded in 1891. It's called Black and White. It joined up with the Sphere in the early 20th century, but you've got some wonderful depictions of Victorian life there. And finally joining us this week is The Spiritualist, and that was a key title of the Spiritualist movement. And before we talk about The Spiritualist, we've got some more answers to our question of the week. We've got Ingrid. Chippington, my paternal grandfather served in India during World War I. He was in the 1/10th Middlesex Regiment. I'm lucky enough to have all of his DMOD papers and his medal. His parents kept 19 of the letters he wrote home, luckily. A lot of the letters are replying to the letters sent out to him, but he also talked about people he met out there, especially their connections with his hometown. Oh, wow. He also talked about his life out there, daily routines. He had his camera out there and took photos. Wow, this is amazing. What an archive you have there, Ingrid. And we'll come back to actually talking about soldiers and letters home and the First World War later on today. And Gina would like to go back a couple of generations to find out more information about her great-grandfather who walked out on his family. His birth is a brick wall. What happened after he left? And I can really feel for this one. Similar things in my family tree, just to understand what happened and to demolish those brick walls. And it sounds like Jessie's having a wonderful time on the train. She's a cute dog on the train. She's living her best life. Oh, I'm so glad. I hope you're having a wonderful journey, Jessie. It really sounds like you are. Okay, so back to the newspapers and the Spiritualist. This is a wonderful thing to have a browse of. If you have a spare moment over the weekend or in the coming weeks and months, I definitely recommend sitting down with a cup of tea and browsing this new title, which is The Spiritualist. And this was published on the 19th of November, 1869. And it described itself as a record of the progress of the science and ethics of spiritualism. It was born out of the spiritualist movement, so that's the belief that the souls of the dead exist and can be communicated with. And the spiritualist movement was really established in the 1840s in New York State. The Fox sisters were key to this movement's popularity. Margaretta and Kate Fox from Hydesville, New York, claimed to have communicated with the spirit of a dead peddler via spirit rappings. So they're those knockings. And the popularity of the spiritualist movement grew and grew. And in 1852, American medium Maria B. Hayden visited the UK, and it became very popular. It was really a type of Victorian counterculture. It went against the established notions of religion in many senses, but also at the heart of it were women. Women were seen to be better mediums because they were more sensitive, and the key figures in the movement, like the Fox sisters, like British medium Florence Cook, were women. And even Queen Victoria got involved very early on in the 1840s. She and Prince Albert held seances at Osborne House. So the Spiritualist newspaper is a wonderful record of the movement. You'll find accounts of seances and details that were assembled purely to convince non-believers. Yes, Anya, and early ghost adventures, exactly. And I think this goes well with this picture that I've dug out from the Illustrated Police News, showing spirit writing. So you will find accounts of seances where a spirit has written something down and you've got to put it in the mirror so that you can read it properly. So yeah, definitely recommend. It's I've had a lot of fun going through this particular title this week. Now, sticking with newspapers, but changing tack slightly, and going back to our military theme, as promised, I'd like to just do a little introduction to finding your First World War ancestors in our newspapers. I was going to do a general one on finding military ancestors in newspapers, but that kind of turned out that got bigger and bigger. So I decided to hone in on the First World War. But I will revisit at another time Victorian military ancestors and perhaps even Second World War ancestors in our newspapers in another day. So we'll have a look at the First World War in today's session. So just before we get into exploring the newspapers for ancestors, just wanted to introduce our wealth of specialist military newspapers that we have that are available to browse and search as part of our newspaper collection. So we've got the Aldershot Military Gazette, for example. Aldershot became the heart of the British Army in the Victorian era. And then we've got the Portsmouth Times and Naval Gazette, Portsmouth being, of course, the heart of the Royal Navy. We also have the Volunteer Service Gazette, which mirrors the development of a new corps of volunteers who were built to supplement both the militia and the regular army in case of invasion from the 1850s onwards. And then we've got special illustrated titles that cover the First World War. We've got the illustrated War News and then the starkly named The War. So no mistaking what that one was about. And the illustrated War News is lavishly illustrated. It touches on the home front, but also life on the front lines. And then finally, one that I've pulled out here is Good Morning. And this was the submarine. This was produced for the submarine corps during the Second World War. And it was produced in partnership with the Daily Mirror. And really, it was this light-hearted entertainment newspaper which was sent over to the men on their submarines. And reporters would actually go to the submarine mariners' families, and they would take photos of them and interview them, and that would then go into the paper and be sent to the men. So it was a really a wonderful flavour of home for those men. I can't imagine. I'm very claustrophobic, so I can't imagine being trapped in a submarine underwater for any period of time. Okay, but where to start with searching the newspapers for First World War ancestors? Now, what you can do is start by searching one of our specialist military titles. And the way you can do this, you head to our newspaper collection page, and then along the side, you have the option to search by title. And then you can navigate to any of those titles that I've just mentioned. And I've particularly chosen to search the weekly casualty list for my military ancestors. And this was printed by the War Office and the Air Ministry. Now, this particular publication was published every week, and it contained the 6 daily lists from the previous week. So what these lists contained is sort of truly humbling in a way. They were a list of those men killed, wounded, or missing every day. So every day these lists would be posted, and this particular publication is compiling all of those lists together. So what the newspaper will provide is and the name of the person, of the soldier who's been wounded or killed, their rank and their regiment. And you'll also find reference to the town where their next of kin lived, or the town from where they enlisted. And searching this, it comes with its own quirk, searching this particular newspaper, but I do promise it's worth it. Start with searching by surname. This is a little tricky, and we will see this again, because in these lists, the men are listed by surnames and initials, but the initial and the surname are separated. So, for example, I'm looking for my great-grandfather, Leonard Pickborn. I'd want to start by searching for his surname, and I'm quite lucky. Pickborn, relatively uncommon, but that tactic does become more difficult if you have a more common name. So what you can do, if you have it, you can add in their service number that might be listed in this publication, their regiment, if you know it, and maybe even the town or the place where they're from. So it's really well worth playing with those search terms to turn up a result in this remarkable publication, because I did this and I found out something that I never found. I did not know. So you will see when you're browsing this particular publication the list of the wounded and the list of those who were killed. And I thought I knew everything about my great-grandfather, Leonard, and his war service. I knew that he was a translator. He was in the Royal Army Medical Corps. But I didn't know he was wounded. And this is the only document that I have found so far that tells me that he was wounded. And how can I be so sure? Okay, so he's listed here in the weekly casualty list from the 25th of September 1917, listed under his regiment, Royal Army Medical Corps. He's listed Pickborn 540056L. And can I verify, is there any more information there that can help me verify that it's him? His name's listed alongside his his location where he's from, which is Fulham, and that is where he lived. So I'm pretty sure that this is him, my great grandfather. And I had no idea that he was injured. I had no idea. So I had to text my mum, who had to ask my dad. So that's his grandfather, and my dad doesn't text. He doesn't do modern technology, and he had no idea. And you know what? I think he must have been my great grandfather, part of the generation who they just didn't talk about these things. There were so many men who they fought alongside, so many men who didn't make it back. That were, they didn't talk about their injury if they survived, and they got through it. But I always remain dumbfounded by what you can find in our newspaper collection. And turning up this particular result was, I've had a few "who do you think you are" moments recently, and that was definitely one of them. So we have these wonderfully emotive lists that appeared during the First World War, but our newspapers can also help us to picture the war in even more vivid detail. So I decided to take September 1917 as my starting point, because this was when my great-grandfather Leonard was injured. So what you can do when you're browsing through our newspapers is you can select editions from certain years and months, and this is what I decided to do, to browse the illustrated war news from September 1917 to actually see what scenes he might have witnessed. And of course, we do appreciate the link here between these publications and propaganda. We're not going to see the really nasty, the harrowing images, but there's a sense, there's a flavour, just somehow, that we have these images, and also this is what families would have been looking at back home, trying to work out, trying to visualise for themselves the only sort of vision, the only way they could imagine the scenes of the First World War other than through letters. So September 1917 saw the ongoing Battle of Passchendaele, the Third Battle of Ypres. So one of that symbol of blood and mud and just the sheer horror of the First World War. And on the left-hand side here is a picture from the Illustrated War News, and the caption of it is almost quite proud, and it says, "On our Western Front." Like this is our Western Front, and how proud we are of it. But doesn't it look desolate? And it's also accompanied by a George Eliot quote, "Where the rainy days look dreary." So rainy days and the battlefront, I can sort of think what's more dreary. It's definitely this scene on the Western Front. And then on the right hand side, this is a picture of a German bomb-proofed gun encampment in Lens, just outside of Calais, and it's been inspected by Canadian soldiers. So those with Canadian ancestors, the Battle of Hill 70 had just been fought the month before, and this was the first battle that was actually fought by Canadian soldiers under a Canadian commander, and it was a Canadian victory. Oh, hi, Karen. Karen's just joined us. Good to see you. So yeah, we're just going through finding out about your ancestors in the newspapers in the First World War. But a wonderful thing about our newspapers is you don't need to restrict your searches for your First World War ancestors in our newspapers to just our military newspapers, although they are really wonderful resources. So if you search our newspapers, you can use the date filter. So you can filter to 1914 to 1918, and that can return a wealth of information about soldiers in the Great War. So you can start out in this instance. I would just recommend always, when you're doing this, searching for ancestors in the newspapers, start by using the full name. So, for example, I'm searching for my great-grandfather's brother, Hedley Pickborn, who also fought in the war. And I was lucky enough to turn up details of his injuries from the Leicester Evening Mail from September 1916, so a year before his brother Leonard was injured. The Leicester Evening Mail, that would be one of Hedley's local newspapers. And that's a good thing, that's a good hint as well. If again you've got a slightly more common surname, you can modify your search by location. So you can choose those newspapers which were published in the home county of the soldier that you're looking for. So for example, this one, you might want to just restrict your search for Leicestershire. That's quite a useful thing. So we learn from this newspaper snippet that Headley has received a bullet wound, but is going on well. So he's okay, but others weren't so lucky. A few paragraphs beneath this notice about Headley's injury is the report on the death of Lance Corporal J. Stewart, who had died from his wounds. And the newspaper provides an account of the noble action he had performed, with commendation from one of his commanding officers, Lieutenant Hart. And this quote, it's very moving. It says, his commanding officer says, he died not only doing his duty, but more than his duty. So this is an amazing account of how Lance Corporal Stewart served, and it's so invaluable if this was indeed your ancestor. And there's an accompanying image with this too. And that's also another thing to remember, that when you are searching the newspapers for your First World War ancestors or relatives, there might even be an accompanying photo, particularly if they were sadly killed in action. So that is one thing to remember. You might be lucky enough to come across an image of your relative. And local papers did also feature the same sort of casualty list like we saw in the weekly casualty list newspaper. And there's an example here from the Sheffield Daily Telegraph from June 1915. And again, we do see that separation between the surname and the initial in those lists of the killed and wounded. So that can just make searching slightly more harder. Again, combine with the regiment if you know it, or search for those local newspapers, you might come up with results. So it's really just seeing some of the stories coming in there from everyone about serving relatives and ancestors who served in the First World War. Karen's recently discovered that her granddad fought in the First World War at Passchendaele, Vimy Ridge and Bulcourt. Wow, what a service. And Anya, she's got photos of relatives in the papers with photographs. Very sad. I feel lucky that her great-grandfather and his three brothers all returned home. And that's similar to my family. My grandfather and his great-grandfather and two brothers both served. The three of them served and they all survived. So very lucky on that front. And this has come up earlier with letters home. And, some of us are lucky enough to actually have those letters that their ancestors and relatives wrote home from the front. But for those of us who don't, the newspapers actually have some wonderful examples of soldiers writing letters home. And although, letters would be censored when they were sent, they do provide some very interesting and moving accounts from the front. And this particular one that I've picked out is from the Driffield Times from February 1915. And we have the names of the family, interestingly, here. Again, these quirks of searching. We don't get the name of the soldier, we get the name of the soldier's brother to whom it was sent. So we know that this letter was sent to Mr. G.H. Clark of Lund, and from his brother at the front. And it's a really wonderful voice from the past, and I think it does just a little sample just to read it out. He writes, "The weather has been bad out here. We've had to abandon some of the trenches and build blockades at the back. We were in some trenches over the knees in water. It was grand, I don't think, standing in them for 48 hours, although it was rather amusing at times when some of the boys got stuck in the mud and could not move one way or the other. Of course, we all grouse a bit at times." It's just such a vivid picture of these men standing in the trench mud for 48 hours, 2 days at a time, getting stuck, laughing at each other, complaining. And he continues, "We've had some trying times out here, and still more are to come. No one knows the horrors of this war unless they experience it. I had a pal shot the other day through the head by a sniper, and we could not get him away till dark, so I had to sit by him for 9 hours, rather trying for the nerve sitting by a dead pal all day. But we get used to such things out here. I'm going on champion. It's a very stark description there, and one I did not expect when I was halfway through this letter, that graphic description of what it was actually like for this particular soldier. And he commutes this horror in such everyday language, that sort of very British art of understatement. I'm going on champion. But you just really get a sense of the sheer brutality of the conflict and the impact that it must have had on these men. It's absolutely unimaginable. And we have another set that can help us explore this a little bit further, in case you missed it, which is it's for the British Armed Forces, and it's the First World War soldiers' medical records. And this is another National Archive set. It's MH106. And this set, it can tell you when and where your ancestor was wounded during the First World War. It can also tell you for how long that they were held at a medical facility for treatment. So basically what this is a list of admissions and discharges from hospitals, field ambulances and casualty clearing stations, both on the front in Europe and also back home in the United Kingdom. And one thing to note, there are an amazing 1.3 million records in this set. It's only a representative sample of all the medical records that were kept during the First World War, because sadly only this sample was retained and the rest were destroyed. So if you can't unfortunately find records, that would be why. This is a sample that has survived. And these records, they were used after the First World War. They were used for statistical research following the end of the First World War. And in 1931, they were used to publish a book on casualties and medical statistics of the First World War, of the Great War. Oh, and we've got Jackie here. She's saying, I've had letters from my great uncle from France when serving with the BF 1940, killed in action, age 19. I just how young, just so young, so very young. Thanks for sharing that with us, Jackie. And Karen, my mum never knew about her dad's passing in World War One, so obviously he didn't talk about it like many others. And this will be a recurring theme, that if you survived and got through it, that you didn't talk about it. Imagine just how traumatic it was. And he's been able to show his service on the national roll of the Great War, which he showed it for the first time at the weekend. I can imagine that was very moving. So what can this particular set tell you? Now, the transcription will give you the first and the last name, the birth year, the service number, the rank, the corps, and it will give you the admission date, the transfer date, the death date, if it's applicable, the hospital where the soldier was treated, and the country. So you get a lot of information from the transcript, but do check the images for this set. If you're browsing it, the images contain even more information. So you get a number of years of service. Sometimes, in some instances, you see the religion of the soldier being recorded, but tantalizingly too, the description of the disease or the wound suffered by the soldier listed. So here is an example of one of the transcripts. And remember one of the newspaper cuttings I showed you earlier, which was Hedley Pickborn, my great-grand uncle, and that detailed how he was wounded. And I managed to find him in this set. And we can see that he was admitted to this particular hospital on the 18th of September 1916. September was the same month as the newspaper report, so that tallies. He's a captain, again, that fits with the newspaper report, with the Leicestershire Regiment. And this record from MH106 tells us that he's at Queen Alexandra's Military Hospital at Millbank. So he was in London. So I imagine he's been transferred away from the theatre of war back home to London, so his wound could be treated. And he was lucky enough to be discharged a week later on the 25th of September 1916. And we have a wealth of information here. Seeing this, I was like, right, I'm going to have to research the military hospital at Millbank. Some wonderful pictures there. There's almost already so much to go and research from this information, but the actual image that comes along with this set, it's absolutely fascinating. So he's quite faint, but it comes along. The image will show the list of names, and you can spot Headley Pickborn just near the bottom there. You see Captain Pickborn H. You can see that he's 25. He's been in service for 2 years and 1 month. So we go back, it's September 1916. So he would have enlisted as war began. So he's volunteered, or he's gone straight into the war. And we get to actually see why Headley has come to hospital, and then this is under the column that says disease, and it won't just be disease, it will be injuries too. So the entry on Headley's row reads GSW RT buttock. So this is a first for me, buttock on Facebook Live, but there we go. So GSW, gunshot wound, right buttock. So poor Headley there had a very unfortunate injury. I can imagine very, very painful. But he luckily was able to make a full recovery. But alongside Headley's unfortunate injury there, we see other injuries. So there's details of gunshot wounds to the hands, the face, the cheek, the arms, the wrists, and a couple of cases of flu as well. And just browsing through these causes of admission are just so fascinating. So you get these actual physical wounds, but later on, so this particular extract is from 1918. We see a dislocated shoulder. We see trench feet, not just one trench foot, two trench feet, more gunshot wounds. But this particular list really struck me quite hauntingly, really. We see entries of mania, of melancholia, and of feeble-mindedness. And this list just really shows the devastating mental toll that war has taken on these men. In contemporary parlance, it was known as shell shock. This list shows how the war's impact was so much more than bullet wounds. These men's minds were wounded by all that they have gone through. So I think this is what makes this set so particularly moving, and viewing it. This is over 100 years ago, but I think having these descriptions of how people were hurt, both mentally and physically, just an incredibly moving set. So, of course, First World War saw hundreds of thousands of men killed across the war, alongside civilian casualties, and then devastated, of course, by the Spanish flu epidemic from 1918. Moving on from the First World War, we can go into the 1921 census, and we can see, we can compare that with such records like the First World War soldiers' medical records to see the impact of the war some 3 years later. And I wanted to see what Headley was up to, Headley Pickborn, after his injury, and he survived the war. And as I mentioned earlier, he was lucky enough to survive alongside both of his brothers, Maurice and Leonard. And Headley, we can see he is 29, and he's living with his wife, Clarabelle. I think that's a lovely name, Clarabelle. And Emma Marriott, who is noted as being a nurse, brackets visitor in attendance. And that really got me thinking. The cogs were whirring. Why is she here? Is Headley okay? Is it for Clarabelle maybe? But I can see that from the census that Headley is working. He's an assistant registrar at the University College in Nottingham, and I know that he goes off and have a flourishing career in academia. So I don't think it's for Headley. And I went back to the family tree and like, why is there a nurse here? Why is there a nurse here? Clarabelle was pregnant. Their first child arrived in August of that year. So I think maybe the nurse might have been visiting her just in case, there was complications with the pregnancy. So Headley's, he's overcome his injury in the war to be one of the lucky ones. And maybe he never spoke about his injury either, like his brother, just didn't mention it. And I felt quite lucky in a way to have that connection to the past, being able to ask my dad about his grandfather. Did he talk about the war? Did he say that he was injured? And he didn't. So, I've been able to uncover something that is so tangible, that impacted my dad. He had no idea. So, I always think, we got a big family tree, but there's always so much more to find out. And I think when I was preparing today's session, I found out many more things about my family. So I really hope that if you've been listening and watching today, that have a dive in, revisit some sets you might not have had a browse of, because there's always these little nuggets there waiting for you to find. So thanks so much for joining us today. I'm going to be back with you in 2 weeks, and we're going to have a railway theme in 2 weeks. And next week we'll have the lovely Liam joining you on Fridays Live. But thanks so much for joining us today. If you've got the nice weather, do make the most of it. Not sure how much summer we've got left in the UK, but it's been really great chatting to you all today, and thanks so much for joining us. Do take care and have a lovely weekend. Goodbye.